President gave us a glimpse into the failed philosophy that he has chosen last week when he proclaimed that the private sector was doing just fine. He needs to get out more.
Well, you think Ohio Senator Bob Portman made those remarks with Mitt Romney, who was in the Buckeye State today? Wrong. Portman was in Washington, actually with this guy, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, both speaking at the Faith and Freedom Conference, both rising stars in their party, both on that short list to be Mitt Romney's vice presidential candidate. Senator Portman joining me now. I won't even get into that unseemly political gossip, Senator. Thank you for coming.
Good for you, Neil.
But I will indirectly raise it. Senator, what came up when I thought of having you on the show was the president in Ohio and saying again, harkening back to the Bush years, of which you were a part as a budget director, and that is one thing that could work against you. What do you think about that?
Well, look, Neil, we had 4.5% unemployment back when I was director of the Office of Management and budget director. We also had a budget deficit that was about 1/8 of the size of today's. In fact, I was able to propose, along with the president, a balanced budget over 5 years. And I would love to have those days again.
Yeah, but you know, all the people remember, sir, and again, fairly or not, is that then everything went kablooey. Now, you were gone, you were on to other things. But they won't remember that snapshot. Does that bother you?
No, it doesn't bother me. It just makes me realize that there's a better way. There's a better way to approach our economy, and it's through the fundamentals that have always worked for us, which is encouraging the private sector through tax reform that really makes sense to generate growth, and we can do a lot there. Luckily, we have great potential here because the code is so inefficient, so antiquated, needs updating. Regulatory relief, it makes sense. Getting the budget under control makes sense because it helps to create certainty and predictability and will help get the economy moving again. The alternative is really scary, which is that we continue to run these record deficits and debts and we don't deal with the private sector and its growth. And I don't think we get out of the fiscal hole that we're in if we do that. And I think we head toward Greece and Spain and Italy, and we don't have to look very far across the Atlantic to see where we're headed. We followed Greece into democracy. Let's not follow them into bankruptcy. So I think there are two models here that are actually very distinct. The president talked about it in his speech today in Ohio. He said there's a choice. I agree with him. There is a choice here. It's a pretty stark one.
He was saying that the other choice, your party's choice, would be just coddle the fat cats, give tax breaks to the rich, ask them not to pay a penny more, and that this pretty much, I think, is his populist pitch. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we've tried his way. It hasn't worked the last 3.5 years. Unfortunately, have not worked to get the economy back on track.
Well, he goes back at you, Senator, not you specifically, sir, to say that, well, we tried your way and it didn't work.
Well, the way that Mitt Romney has laid out is not tax cuts for the fat cats. It's tax reform to get the economy moving. He's been explicit about it. He's talked about it not just in the general election, but back in the primary. He's talked about regulatory relief to take some of the burden off businesses that have been increased in this administration. He's talked about developing our domestic energy supplies in an aggressive way with a national plan to make us, for once, less dependent on foreign oil and begin actually to export energy from the United States. He's talked about the need for us to enhance trade and expand trade. This president's the first president since FDR, as you know, not to have the authority and not to ask for the authority to negotiate trade agreements. Unbelievable, because our farmers and workers and service providers want it. So I think he's not talking about, the same campaign that I'm watching, which is Mitt Romney laying out very aggressive reforms to get this economy moving again.
Okay.
That do not, bear a whole lot of resemblance to anything that's been done before, because it's about tax reform. Maybe you go back to Ronald Reagan, 1986. That might be the better analogy, where Democrats and Republicans alike decided we were going to put together a pro-growth tax reform proposal that generated a lot of that growth we saw in the 1980s. That's what the choice is. It's whether we're going to move forward with a strong economy or whether we're going to stay mired in the weakest recovery since the Great Depression.
Can I indulge a personal question? I only say this because I'm speaking of myself as well. You get a rap, fairly or not, for being dull. There's nothing wrong with dull, Senator. I built a career on it. But that is the rap against you in these Veep stakes, which I promised you I wasn't going to get into. I'm just curious whether you think dull is a problem.
Well, first of all, Neil, you're the last guy in the world I would call dull. You may be the most interesting man on TV.
There you go.
So I wouldn't worry about that for you. Look, the press is going to characterize you different ways. I believe what we're looking for right now, and I think we've got it in Mitt Romney, is somebody who actually understands the problem, knows how to create jobs, has been there, been in the private sector, and has got the proposals I talked about a minute ago to actually move the country forward. Some may look for some other attributes, like, you know, the sort of People magazine attributes of a celebrity that we looked for in 2008. You know, that didn't work. And so I think what we need now is people who are serious, who understand the trouble our country is in, and have credible plans to address the problems. And that's what you see with Mitt Romney. And I think, you know, in a state like Ohio, those voters that make the difference, which tend to be the independent voters, you know, who are not Republican, not Democrat, still looking at the candidates, are going to look for a serious approach this time, because we are in trouble. We need the help. We've got to get the economy moving again. We have to deal with the debt and deficit. And I think that's why Mitt Romney is going to do very well in my state.
Senator, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
Good to be on with you.